What do you think is faster, oversteer or understeer? What about both of them? When we start learning about racing, we immediately stumble upon these two important factors in car dynamics. Oversteer happens when the front tires point the car into the corner, but the rears are not capable of taking that much traction and they give up first. The rear then starts sliding, moving outwards more than the front end of the car, which makes the total slip angle of the car way over the acceptable limit. We are officially sliding. It's important to note here that the oversteer is always a reaction, as the front tires need to initiate the rotation before the rear starts to give up. Remember this because we're gonna talk about this later. As you can see, too much oversteer is bad. Understeer happens when the front tires try to point the car into the corner, but the rears are resisting that rotation too much. The front tires then give up first, and the car starts pushing forwards against the intended steering wheel angle. This is also clearly bad. So you don't want to be doing any of these, right? Then why does everyone keep saying that they want a car that oversteers more or that understeers more? If both are bad, what should we aim for? None? Both? Well, yeah, both at the same time.
Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the neutral steer.
Now things might get a little bit complicated, so calm down and pay attention. Neutral steer means that the car has the same amount of slip angle, let's call it scrub for explanation purposes, both on the front and rear tires. Of course, it is impossible to be at this state during the entirety of the corner, because you will at some point have to turn the steering to initiate a corner, change directions, or make adjustments. So you'll be pretty much on and off this state. Neutral steer is the ultimate goal of car handling. This is where you will extract the maximum grip possible from the four tires. Removing the driving line from the equation, the faster driver will be the one who spends the most time in this state. So here's how you can reach neutral steer. In cars, for beginners, understeer is definitely easier to deal with and survive a long stint. The car gets into a predictable line and you go along for the ride. As long as your speed is close to the ideal one, you can pretty much wait for the car to turn until you feel comfortable to accelerate. This kind of driving allows you to wait and take a nap until the car does its thing. You can spend a lot of time, sometimes full seconds, doing nothing, just waiting for the car to turn. So we can say that understeer is the easiest way to put you in a nice comfort zone as you're cruising around the corner. In understeer, we are on the limit of only 2 tires, with the rear tires taking little stress. Oversteer is a bit complicated. At the beginning, it will happen faster than you're prepared to, which will scare you or take you into a spin. Initially, we are not capable of feeling it fast enough, and we end up not doing a correction in time, which makes it even worse. But as we start predicting what kinds of inputs cause more oversteer, like trail braking, engine braking, and steering, we become more prepared to deal with it and make it happen in smaller and smaller sizes. When we correct oversteer with countersteer, we end up stopping the front tires from creating forces towards the inside of the corner. So during the correction of a big oversteer, we are only using 2 tires, just like understeer. Remember when we said oversteer is a reaction? Exactly! It reacts to the driver giving too much grip to the front tires. So we do have some sort of control of how much oversteer we cause, especially if we are aware of an oversteery setup or car. Neutral steer happens when we get used to both understeer and oversteer, to the point we start dealing with microscopic bits of them and we start dancing with the car. This is when we start spending more and more time in a state where the car is indeed sliding both ends a little bit. A clear case of neutral steer is when the car is drifting through a corner but the steering is completely neutral. This does not mean that we should spend the most time possible with the steering pointing straight. We can still reach the neutral steer state, front and rear tires sliding a bit, with steering angle. The lower the speed, the more steering we want. In understeer, we are using 2 tires at the limit. In oversteer, we are using 2 tires at the limit. And in neutral steer, we're using all 4 tires on the limit. With this magic ideal neutral steer in mind, We can still ask ourselves if it's faster to drive an oversteery car versus an understeery car. Bear in mind that you can still induce understeer in oversteer setups and induce oversteer to some extent in understeer setups. But the first case, inducing understeer in an oversteer setup, is definitely easier. And that is why 99.999% of the fastest drivers will prefer an oversteery car. One of the exceptions, for example, in the Formula 1 grid is that Sergio Perez actually prefers an understeery car, whereas Max Verstappen says that it's impossible to be fast with understeer in Formula 1. Guys, remember that this is a very simplistic explanation of oversteer versus understeer. The cars can oversteer on entry and then understeer mid-corner and then oversteer on exit and vice versa. You can have many combinations of over and under depending on the setup, on the car, on the differential, on the corner, on your driving style, and so on. An oversteery car allows you to spend much more time in the neutral steer state, as you have some room for correction, whereas an understeery car is much more difficult to get away from just destroying your front tires. Oversteer is a more controllable state and forces you to drive more actively, with many small corrections, which forces you to be a much more present and focused driver. An understeery car is lazy and sometimes there's nothing you can do with it, because to correct the understeer you end up overslowing the car way too much, making you lose seconds of your lap time. Now, some cars definitely look like they don't oversteer at all, especially race cars with slick tires. Why is that? Because of one thing called the slip angle. The optimal slip angle is how much a tire should be sliding in order to give the maximum traction possible. Some tires have a much higher slip angle, like road tires, and driving them on the limit really looks like the car is sliding all the time. The lesser the optimal slip angle, the less it looks like the car is going sideways. That's why karts and historic cars are clearly sliding all the time, while Formula 1 cars look like they are on rails, not sliding at all. But they are. If you're too used to understeery cars and want to find those last seconds in your lap time, get out of your comfort zone and think about this. If you're dealing with fixed setups and the car is understeering or oversteering way too much, you have to start inducing the opposite behavior through driving inputs. Inducing understeer and oversteer are two crucial techniques to reach our loved neutral state in different cars. Before we finish this video, I want to give you some important tips so you'll never forget about them when you're practicing. If you are understeering, do not add more steering. It will make it worse. A lot of people do that. A lot of high-level people do that. If you're understeering, just try to add some more weight to the front tires by either lifting a little bit the throttle, or if you're steering the braking phase, adding a little bit more braking. The slower the car, the safer it will be to have a more oversteery setup. The faster the car, the more downforce and the slickier the tires, the more unforgiving the car will be, and you have to be very careful to not add too much oversteer to the car. Oversteery cars already want to turn, so you don't have to force any rotation. Understeery cars do not want to turn, so you end up having to snap rotation out of them, and sometimes this causes an even worse oversteer. This is the famous understeer snap oversteer, so be careful with that. So basically, less is more with the steering input. The less you have to force the front tires to keep the car rotating, the better your driving will be. By the way, you might be losing a lot of time if you're not applying these 5 tips that I talk about in this video. Since you stayed until the end of this video, I'm gonna give you a discount coupon to the Motor Racing Checklist, my online course that teaches so much more that you cannot even imagine. If this video inspired you to go practice more, subscribe to this channel and I will be posting a lot more videos with more technique tips in the next few days. See ya!